Matt got back from Mexico recently, and we got talking about checking.
I was there for about a month. Just such a great break from a lot of things, including work and especially my phone.
Did you leave your phone in Vancouver?
No, I took it with me. It was such a great break from everything related to my phone. Because we didn't have great internet there. Here in Vancouver, I would put my phone by my bed to check everything. Whether it be email or social media. When we went to Mexico, we didn't have great internet, so I ended up just kind of leaving it by the bedside most of the time and not checking it and just kind of enjoying life without checking a lot of the stuff that I'm used to. Um,
Oh no, did it feel like it wasn't real then? Like you weren't really in Mexico because you weren't able to get immediate feedback on social media to confirm that you were in Mexico? Yeah.
a little bit, maybe
A
like the
little?
first couple weeks were definitely
Okay.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but after that first couple of weeks of kind of getting used to not checking things for a while, I found like I slept way better. I enjoyed the conversations I was having more,
Okay.
and I was able to focus on a lot of things during the day a little bit better,
Yeah.
especially the morning. I think it was 3 weeks. The 3 weeks before we left to Mexico, I was having a lot of projects come in at kind of all hours of the day. Even though I work from home, it was kind of hard managing my schedule because
Okay.
some of my clients were in different time zones, so I would
Okay.
end up getting work at all these different hours of the day. I was having really bad sleep patterns the few weeks leading up to that trip, and
What was going
um,
on? Were you working really late?
I wasn't actually working
What
really
was
late,
bad? Okay.
but I would just be worried that something would come in, like a message or an email,
Okay.
um, when I was sleeping,
Yeah.
um, just because of the time difference for some of my projects. And so what would end up happening is like I would, try to get to sleep, and I would have my phone by my bed, and I was just having trouble getting to sleep because I would keep checking my phone,
Uh,
thinking like there's going to be a message or an email there, when most of the time there wasn't. And and I felt like yeah, it would just be like a constant kind of cycle of checking those things, and then sometimes when I couldn't sleep, uh, just by checking my phone for that, it would open the door to like checking other things like
uh,
social media, or what was going on in the news,
just
or
goes.
yeah, it would just keep snowballing. I think before that month started, where I was getting really busy with work, I felt like
Hmm.
I had a pretty good handle on like controlling some of those compulsions with using my phone. But once work started picking up, they just kind of happened again. So when I got back from Mexico, um,
Hmm.
I knew that I had to change things because I was like, I do not want to go like 2 weeks with sleeping terribly again. So I felt like one of the first things I should do was to play with like cutting some things out. So that was like removing my phone from the side of my bed.
Yeah. Were you using your phone as an alarm clock or anything like that?
No, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really have any super useful purpose that I was keeping it there by the bed for.
Hmm.
Um, like
The
my wife,
radiation keeps you warm. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, my wife Daniela uses it
Yeah.
for an alarm clock, and
Okay.
so there's like a special use there, I guess. But yeah, I decided to take it out and put it somewhere else in our apartment, and
Okay.
I've done that like the whole of this month, so like pretty much all of January,
Oh,
and
what's changed?
I sleep like way better. The phone's not right there, so
Hmm.
I don't feel like I have to check it right then and there. Even that little bit of distance helps. Like I know it's still in our apartment, but I'd have to get out of bed. I'd have to like do a bunch of steps to get there. I've also just I've tried putting it like in one place in our apartment that I have to go to, rather than me carrying it with me all the time.
Do you need to carry it with you all the time?
I don't think so. Um, it's just you feel the need, I think, just because like something is always happening. If somebody's going to message you, an email is going to come in, that fear of missing out that a lot of people talk about. But yeah, it's definitely helped like changing just even a couple of a couple of those behaviors. When I'm thinking about how I've changed with these behaviors, I'm hitting at a couple of like interesting things, like why did I have my phone by the bed in the first place? Like, was it really because I needed it there, or was it because I wanted it there to have easy access to check all these apps that I was using? I feel like I did put it there initially because when I used to have a full-time job, I did use it as an alarm clock, and I did use it for more maybe like useful things, I guess.
Because you use the social media to share a lot of creative projects, though, too.
Yeah,
do you ever find yourself thinking about creative projects in the same way you end up thinking about, to like somebody sending a work email? Often we're worried, oh, like somebody's going to send a message, or I'm going to get something, like something's coming. Something's coming at me. Like our brains end up being very worried about like what's coming at me from the world around us. In the same way, somebody, they might just be going outside and they're worried about like what's going to come at me while I'm out there, or what's going to come at me when I'm driving. But then if we flip things and we're looking at, well, how do I use this thing to create stuff? Like, how do I send the stuff out through it? Sometimes our brains get hooked on the, oh no, what's coming at me? And we neglect the, how do I express stuff and give stuff and things like that? Because you use it to express all sorts of awesome creative projects. How does that fit into this? Because it's an outlet for you as well, right?
I noticed that when I changed that behavior of like putting the phone in a different place, then like there would still be a certain part of the morning where I would use it to check like almost like catch up on all the stuff that I missed. So then I would like spend 10 minutes or whatever, like just going through stuff. And so I was like, okay, what if I use that time to do something else? Like produce something, rather than kind of what you're saying, like just taking stuff in. So now I tried to replace that time with writing. The morning right after breakfast is like a really good time for me to do that rather than consume stuff. I spend like about an hour writing now.
Because I find the thing we start doing in the morning has such a transformative impact on basically how our brains operate for the rest of the day. And that's something I found too. There's almost something, if I start the day consuming, it just puts my brain in this passive mode where it's just going to consume stuff. And then all the rest of the day, it's just looking for something to get. But I think, I find that too. If the first thing I do in the morning is about creating stuff, it just gets the brain into this mode of, oh, I create stuff, I make stuff. And then throughout the day, it's like, what are we going to make next? Not like, entertain me. I am not entertained. Which is, because it does, then we run into because often the thing is too, we don't feel good in the mornings. We wake up, we're kind of tired and we haven't eaten, and, even from in our bodies, there's like lots of cortisol and like we're kind of stressed and we don't know what's going to happen. There's lots of uncertainty. Maybe our brains have just started like throwing up lots of intrusive thoughts. And if our reaction to that is like, oh, I don't feel like doing something yet, I've got to warm up, so I'm going to entertain myself. Our brains just learn that. Then every time we're bored, our immediate reaction is, oh, I feel bad, throw a screen in front of my face. And then we can't function without that. Every time we run into a feeling we don't like, we're like, oh, I'm just going to go check Facebook. And so like we're really stressed with work and our brain is like, oh, I can't handle this. Go look at Instagram. Or, oh, I can't handle this. Just go flip through Tinder profiles. And it just becomes the response to everything. So I think that like, what you're digging into there in the mornings is so transformative. But because there is something different about the modes, whether we're in passive, just feed me entertainment mode, or creative, put stuff out into the world mode.
Yep.
They are different.
Like the end of the day behavior too, because like I found that like I would like just before sleeping, that would be the time where I would check my phone often as well. So so trying to replace that with other behaviors, and so I've started reading at night where I only used to read in the mornings. Actually, before I started that would all be time on a phone, like an hour.
Just spinning it up, and then the brain is like, hey, you want to check more things, you want to prevent like something bad happening with work, I'll keep doing that. I think that's the thing that I find so useful. I always remember, I'm basically training my brain how I want it in this hour. I'm training my brain how I want it to act for the next hour. So if I want to go to sleep, But in
Yeah.
this hour, I'm teaching my brain like, oh, quickly, we have to like solve all of these uncertainties. My brain will just keep doing that. And then we
Yeah.
don't sleep well. And then we're tired the next day. So then we don't do the stuff we want. So then there's more problems to solve. So then we stay up late trying to solve those problems, which then feeds into the next night. And then it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And we're never happy with it. Brains
Yeah.
are great. I think the moral of the story, brains, awesome.
You just gotta take care of them though.
Yeah, they are like they are kind of simple. At the end of the day, you just think like, what am I doing right now? Because my brain is going to keep doing that. So what am I training my brain to do right now? And how then, like we were talking about, how is that going to affect my perception of reality? Did you see the poll that I had posted on Twitter about people checking their phones?
Yeah, and I asked other people about it too that I knew. Most of the people I asked about it too, they would just say like, yeah, like that's something I do too, and me included. So I think, yeah, you hit on something really interesting there.
So we'll throw up the picture here of the poll. So the question I asked was, have you ever heard your phone ring or vibrate like you got a message or a call only to pull it out and there was nothing? And so that very, very unscientific Twitter poll had 65 votes. So 92% said yes, 8% said no. So this is a question actually. So researchers, there's been a bunch of different studies on this. So I'll post some of the study links under the description on YouTube. Like 92 actually isn't an absurdly high number. There have been studies that have found around 90%. There are also studies that find fewer people say yes to that. But like you were doing there, just asking people, like anybody watching this right now, you can just ask yourself, have you ever heard your phone ring or vibrate and then you've picked it up and there was nothing there, but you were completely certain you heard that sound? This is an auditory hallucination. It was real, right? You really believed you heard it or you felt it, right? It's a physical hallucination. And I often bring up this point and this research when I'm doing talks because it's one of those ways that we often think of experiencing things that aren't real as this, like that means you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is most people experience these things and they don't see through it. Right? Most people don't recognize that this is a hallucination, a delusion, and then they react to it. And so I always bring it up because I think it's a really useful way to understand the work that people are doing to take care of their mental health, because you have to see through something that you believe is real.
Mm-hmm.
But then also it's so useful to see because you see how anybody's brain, so say like, some research shows 90% of people's brains have these experiences. You see the impact of practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is totally the result of checking our phones all the time, linked with either a desire or a fear, right? Like I want to get these messages, or maybe I'm afraid of getting those messages, and so my brain is checking. Oh no, like did we hear a message? Oh no, because like that could mean something bad's happening. And you see this practice at work. So I think it's so useful to question, what are we doing through our practices? It can go in either direction. You can experience something that's not really there. Or, this is also really important to keep in mind with our checking, you can experience, like you fail to experience reality. So I'll explain what that means. Like I used to check the stove all the time to make sure that it was off. And at first I would just kind of check the knobs and I would wiggle them. And so over time though, I guess at first I would look. Often I would just look in the kitchen, see, oh, it's off. Okay, I can go. And then I would question whether it was really off. So I would wiggle the knobs, and then that progressed to wiggling the knobs and touching the elements to make sure they were hot. And then that progressed to, looking, touching the knobs, touching the elements, and then standing there. Because I couldn't be certain that the stove was off. And that's a natural progression we see with checking compulsions, is because you're basically telling your brain, like, don't believe reality. I can see that it's off, but now I'm going to touch it to make sure it's off. And then I can see it's off and I can feel it's off, but now I'm going to, touch it even more. And we keep sending these messages to our brain, like, don't believe your senses, don't believe your senses, and eventually we can't. And we see this, so on that extreme end, then we start to label that as a mental illness. But we see it in all sorts of things, like when people experience depersonalization or disassociation. That comes from, again, constantly checking to make sure you're real. Or like derealization just about the world, like that the world is real. The more we check, the less we're able to believe it. We see it in relationships when people have relationship anxiety. They're checking all the time to make sure they feel this is right, and then they can't feel it. And with health anxiety too. That's what I'd throw out to anybody out there, to really question, like, how are your practices affecting your perception of reality? Because you can see it, even if it's something just as simple as checking your phone, right? That eventually starts to warp your perception of reality, and you start to hear and feel things that aren't actually there. And that's just one instance. Like, if you know, and so anybody who answered yes out there, you know already that repetitive practice affects your brain because you've experienced that. Really think it's probably affecting your brain in other ways that aren't as noticeable. Okay, because think the phone is easy. We hear the sound and we pick up the phone and then we're like, oh, why didn't I get a message? I thought I got one. But then in other scenarios, maybe we believe something that's not really there, so we avoid things. Right? Like, think about anxiety, like we've talked about before. We feel anxious. We're like, oh, this is bad. I shouldn't go and do this thing. And then we avoid it. Mm-hmm. And so we never get the chance to realize we were wrong about the perception of reality we had about that situation. Has this experience you've had, has this changed how you approach any other types of technology or practices?
Well, yeah. So I kind of look at, I mean, they're definitely connected, but I kind of look at like the physical like detachment from the phone a little bit differently from using the things in the phone, like apps within the phone. Yeah. So I find like that's another approach to behavior changing or behavior switching that I'm still having trouble with. So kind of figuring out how to use them in a way that doesn't degrade my mental health or doesn't kind of bring me back to a place of like compulsively checking all the time. So I feel like that's the part where I'm just kind of thinking about right now, like, how do I not cut it out completely, because I feel like that's not the solution, because I think these apps are going to be always a part of our lives. They're how we communicate in a lot of ways. Like, there's some members of my family who really just only communicate on Facebook now, and other people that use different apps. So I don't feel like cutting them out completely and like just buying an old cell phone and forcing everybody to contact me through that is going to work. Which I've thought about, but it's like
I only receive carrier pigeons.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like figuring out, is there a good way to approach this? Which I don't know yet.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think it's useful to explore. Like, I keep my phone beside my bed, and I had to go through a process of learning how to have it there, and like, that's okay that it's there, and I'm not going to pick it up because I use it as an alarm clock. So I find being able, and I find a very physical feeling at first to wake up and your brain just wants to check your phone, and I'm like, no, I'm going into the kitchen and I'm going to make breakfast, and it feels like physically it requires you to break a chain. It's a really neat exercise to play around with, because I think these tools can be transformative tools to affect, do awesome things in the world, and create stuff and get it out there. I mean, and so much of what we do on Everybody Has a Brain is answering questions from people all over the world, which is amazing, and being able to share stuff with people all over the world. But we could just as easily stay at home and just flip through, I don't know, like just watch anime videos all day.
True.
Fine. Yeah.
A lot of the behavior patterns for using those apps, like, they come from other people. How do I want to use it versus how do I see other people using it and want to copy them?
Yes, totally.
Because I know that is not necessarily healthy for me. It doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me want to do the work that I enjoy doing. It's taking time away from that. So how do I start with myself?
That's a good question. How do you want to use technology?